So what are you going to do to help fathers have better rights in the court system?
I have to tell you, I have never thought about that issue. I paid child support, and I paid a lot for child support. But I've never, until you brought it up a little earlier tonight, it's not an issue that I, consider. I think most it's regulated on the state rather than the federal government. But I would love to hear what what you think, because mostly I've heard people argue that if you father a child, that you have a responsibility for that child.
No, absolutely.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Themis and Thoth. Grab your coffee, water, tea, whatever you're drinking, go and get that. I'm holding this because I pinned it on my clothes. There was a lot of noise. I'm smiling, but I'm not happy because I lost over an hour of audio. I tested it and it sounded okay now, so hopefully this is fine. Anyway, welcome back to Themis and Thoth again. Grab your coffee, water, tea, whatever you're drinking, go and get that. Erica De Niro, help. Erica De Niro, help. I don't know how to use this mic. Today, we're going to be talking about RFK, who is running for president, apparently, as an independent. He decided that he would go to Atlanta, Georgia, to go talk to black men in the black community, to discuss potential policy to kind of win over the black male vote. In this discussion, child support took center stage. And when I said child support took center stage, I mean that in terms of policy decision and policy framework for a candidate, it seems the men in this conversation cared about child support and fighting back against the child support system because in their mind, it disenfranchises men. And it wouldn't be a wild conversation because we've heard this all online before. It's only a weird conversation because this is someone running for president. Now, again, he is running as an independent. So the likelihood that he's going to win is non-existent at this point. But how is there such a useless conversation? How are there no policy prescription being made around economic development, prison reform, because that's what we usually go to. So I thought that would have been the easiest one. None of that. Access to resource and education, the housing crisis, homelessness, healthcare. They're talking about child support and fighting back. Who selected these men? That's my first question. Who selected these men? Why is this the representation? Instead of just jumping right into the conversation, however, let's start with the clip of RFK talking about racial slurs, racial epithets. And I'm going to play it and then we'll discuss it because this conversation, it's so dusty to me and it makes no sense, not just because of the men talking to RFK, but RFK Jr. Robert F. Kennedy, by the way, Jr., he's running for president. And it's weird to me because his position seems very archaic. So let's hear him talk about racial slurs and what Black men and Black people need to do when it comes to racism. Let's play that and then we'll discuss because the conversation again is useless, not only because of these men not having policy prescriptions, but also because these men refuse to actually engage in a meaningful conversation and push back when they need to. And this is a time when they needed to push back when one of the most well-connected men in America from one of the most prominent families said the following.
Charter schools are working for Black families. And we have a charter school in New York called the Success Academy. It has 20,000 kids now educating. And they have a better graduation rate and a better college placement rate than the best white public schools in New York State, the Scarsdale School. There's no school that does better than them. And what they've proven is that bad educational failure is not the result of race, it's not the result of culture, it's not the result of location. It all has to do with the quality of the school. That every kid, if they're given a good opportunity to education, they can flourish. We need to give kids good education, and we need to start flooding those communities with capital so people can start their own businesses and become role models in those communities. There's a lot of things we have to do about, pardoning people who've been in the prison system so they're not second-class citizens, et cetera. But the main thing, when I was a kid, I grew up in a time when there was tremendous anti-Catholic prejudice. My uncle was the first Catholic president of the United States, and when he ran, the Ku Klux Klan had a resurgence, and I was called names when I was a kid. I was called Mackerel Snatcher, and I was called Mick, and all these names. It never affected me, because I would think I had confidence in myself. I had confidence in my education. I had confidence that I was going to do something important with my life. Oh, if somebody called me a name, a slur, I would think, what's wrong with that person? I wouldn't internalize it and think that what's wrong with me. That is the gift that we need to give every black kid, where he doesn't care if somebody used the N-word, because he knows that he's going to flourish in his life. He knows that he has a good education. We need to give them that resilience, because we're never going to insulate him from every racial episode. We may be able to reduce them, but we're not going to insulate them. And what we need to do is build their characters in ways where they don't care what other people think.
Okay, there was a jump cut at this point, so I'm not sure if there was a conversation around how idiotic this position is and how out of line the RFK Jr. is in telling black people that the problem around racism has to do with their inability to be confident. That what we need is to be confident. And he remembers a time, as wealthy and well-connected and prominent as his family was, that he, as a child growing up, was being discriminated against because of his Catholic beliefs. And that kind of discrimination he could brush off because he recognized that he was about to be and do something great with his life. And that's the kind of confidence we need to instill in our black kids. Girl, I promise you this. Confidence, when it comes to racism, is not the issue. Let me clarify. I do believe we need to make sure that our children are being raised and they are confident and they know that they have something to contribute to the world and therefore they are of importance, right? This is true, but this is not the remedy for racism. My lack of confidence is not why I am animated to react to racist and racism aimed at me. It's not about confidence. How seemingly well-meaning I think this person is, I think it is absolutely irresponsible to blame the victims of racism for racist behavior. Like, that is wild to me, for you to say it is on the black person to be more confident and thus not react to racism. Anti-Catholic sentiments, which RFK is pointing out, is not the same as racism. I'm not saying it's not difficult for a Catholic to experience these kinds of anti-Catholic sentiments, but it is not the same in terms of history in the US with the N-word and the experience of black people. So just telling black people they need to be confident when racism shows up in their life is wild to me. And I say this while recognizing that we do actually need to be resilient. But from one of the wealthiest, most well-connected families, that is a wild statement. Like, that is actually a wild statement. This is a man, and we're going to insert a clip here, that talks about him overcoming his addiction. He said it, not me.
And by the way, I've been 40 years in recovery. I was a heroin addict from when I was 15 years old to when I was 28 years old. So I'm in recovery. I go to 12-step meetings every day. I go to 9 a week.
And was able to then go back into the world and be seen as a potential candidate, being interviewed and talked to and treated as if his campaign is legitimate. Now, he's running as an independent, so there is that. But a lot of people, due to the war on drugs, aren't able to do the same. They're not even able to be free in society. A lot of people have not been able to overcome this war on drug, where you, for a lot of your life, not most, have been hooked on substances and then you were able to overcome it. Similarly, the kind of privilege that allows you to be able to be hooked on drugs and get off and then be able to run for president and not be locked up is a kind of privilege, I believe, that allows you to be able to look past anti-Catholic sentiments, where a black person being disenfranchised by racism might see the N-word very differently than you see words aimed at you for your Catholic sentiments. I'm sorry, those two things are just not like each other. They're not the same. So, anywho, that's how it started. And then we got into some more foolishness. Here we have a Hotepper talking about attack on masculinity. Now, again, with all my issues around RFK's sentiments around race and racism and confidence, and that's what we're lacking, and that's what we need to instill in our children. For all of that, he does come in there talking about policies and economic change in the Black community and kind of giving a history of his family engagement with civil rights movement and the push for Black liberation. So he does come in somewhat good faith, it seems, but these men literally sat up there and decided that they were going to take this opportunity to highlight the war on masculinity. And go, I can't make this up. Listen to this, and then we'll discuss. This man is talking about divine masculinity.
Like Florida, you can't vote.
Yeah, I'm from Florida, so I know that Florida, that's a Florida law.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? And all my people that serve time there, they can't vote, but they got to pay taxes.
And you also can't vote if you have the same name as one of those guys.
Yeah, I guess. But the congressmen who got elected that are ex-cons, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Like that lets you know that something's going on, to your point. And I mean, even with our children that we losing to the whole abortion thing, how they're pushing that. I look at it, if you kill masculinity, then you can kill femininity. If you kill femininity, then you kill humanity. So that's what they're doing. How can masculinity be toxic? How can I continue to separate the masculine, divine masculine man from the divine masculine woman to have a tribe of young children that now contribute positively to a nation? And so we don't have that because everything is separated. And it's all based upon the money, of course. And so when a system is backwards, when it's right wing, left wing, one bird, how do you really get an opportunity to stop listening to CNN and Fox and every politician?
Stop listening to CNN and Fox and every politician is where I just pause it. We'll continue in a moment. We'll continue. This man is talking about divine feminine and divine masculine, and killing the divine masculine and killing the divine feminine ultimately kills the world. We're talking to the person running for president, and we're talking again about policies that should be implemented in the best interest of the Black community. And this man is talking about divine feminine and divine. What is this man talking about? Where's the economic policies?
Here we are in the same boat, or worse. Those stories you told, they have a lot of validity and they hit home, but it sounds like the same plight that Malcolm X was talking about.
Yeah.
It sounds like the same plight that Marcus Garvey, was talking about. And so having these conversations with you, I'm glad. But we do. Our babies are aborted. It's so many issues that we can hit on. Right. But how do you fight against a system that wasn't created for you in the first place?
How do you fight against a system that's not there for you? The homicide rate is high. The leading cause of death for Black men ages 1 to 44 is homicide. Let me put the Pew Research up for us to see. I am confused as to how this is not being mentioned. We're losing our children to abortion. No, actually, we're losing our children to violence in neighborhoods. Unless we start discussing where life begins, I'm not about to have this abortion conversation at all. You're talking about killing masculinity and femininity, but you're not actually engaging in meaningful discourse around economic improvement of the Black community. This is wild to me. Hearing these men talk is like actually, let's continue. It's actually wild. Like there is no policy prescriptions being made.
The highest chronic disease rate in America is Blacks, who has the worst food.
You eat from the farm and not the farm.
What?
We used to eat from the farm.
That's it, right.
Now we eat farming, yeah.
Right.
Right? And if you
Right.
take the P off of pharmacy, it's pharmacy. Mother Nature gives us
I like
what we
that.
need
Yeah.
to live and survive it. And you talk about Monsanto, and you talk about genetically modified organisms. If I feed you genetically modified foods,
You are
then
what
the
you
people
eat.
are going to operate in a genetically
Modified
modified
way.
way.
Yeah.
And so if the food is dead, if the TV's dead, the religions are dead, education's dead, the government's dead, then someone speaking life is not palatable to those people. So when you have people that are speaking life to someone who's used to consuming death, then why do you think we're not getting through and we're not penetrating? The veil is not lifted. So to your point, we have to change the consumption of our people. We got to get rid of the chemicals, the toxic chemicals. That's what's creating people to not want to be fertile anymore.
Yeah,
I told you, if you make the man weak, then you can do whatever you want to the women and children. And that's what's happening in our nation and in the world.
Yeah.
So we got a lot of work to do.
If you make the man weak, you can do whatever it is that you want to the women and children. Then that sounds like we're weak as men then. Because they can do whatever they want to the women and children. We were slaves, and I think there is a willingness to forget that, to say that we are these like strong, powerful warriors that need to be taken down through an attack on our masculinity in order for these overlords, this cabal of white men in these people's imagination to come into the community and attack the women. They can already do that. Like we were slaves, there was Jim Crow, we built cities and they burnt them down and took over. Like we are marginalized. They like the idea that we're like powerful, and that is what is being attacked through propaganda about Black men masculinity and child support and all of that. We'll get to the child support bit later. It's wild. I don't think any of that is now necessary. If there was an attack on Black masculinity, it already happened while we were enslaved. Jim Crow. Like, I don't understand this. Like, I don't understand this positioning. And then saying, pharmacy is pharmacy. I really hate the fact that at one point in my life, I would snap for that because the Hotep in me was strong. The Hotep in me was strong, girl. It was real strong. So now hearing that and cringing is like better for my spirit, because this again is a policy conversation with a candidate, unlikely as he is to win the presidency. A candidate for the presidency of the United States. What do you mean you're talking about attack on masculinity and divine feminine? Genetically modified food creates genetically modified behavior. Girl, period. I don't know. I have no clue what this man is talking about at this point. Yes, we need better food. Yes, we do need to engage in a way that is more healthy around consumption of food and access to food. I actually fundamentally agree with this, but this attempt to rhyme words in your speech instead of just saying what you need to say is kind of ridiculous and ultimately reductive to the conversation. All right, now let's get into child support. Let's do it. Let's get into... This is such a dusty conversation. This is a dusty conversation. And you want to know why before we even play the clip? This is a bad, terrible, dehumanizing conversation because we're watching a bunch of men sit around RFK and essentially begging him to change the system that allows for responsibility when it comes to men taking care of their children and not abandoning their children. And it wouldn't be as bad optically if RFK agreed. But in this video, you will see RFK saying, oh, I didn't even know this was a problem. Wait, this is a problem? You think that the child support system is an attack on men? How? Like, his concern, him asking for more information while being someone who was on child support, who agrees to pay child support without the system, he is like, his mind is a bit blown and he's trying to be respectful in his pushback by saying, well, you have a responsibility. Let me play this. Let me play this.
Yeah, outside of that, I have something that's near and dear to my heart. So, from the standpoint of like, we talked about, gaining capital, we talked about helping businesses and all these different things. But I know for me, even though you can help a man get money, you could do all these different things, but when it comes to him having a child and getting a fair shake in the court system, if something was to happen, whether you got money or you don't, nobody's exempt from being taken advantage of. So what are you gonna do to help fathers have better rights in the court system?
I have to tell you, I have never thought about that issue. I paid child support, and I paid a lot for child support. But I've never, until you brought it up a little earlier tonight, it's not an issue that I, consider. I think most it's regulated on the state rather than the federal government. But I would love to hear what you what you think, because, mostly I've heard people argue that if you father a child, that you have a responsibility for that child.
No, absolutely.
And so tell me what you're,
mother a child, you got that responsibility as well. That's the thing.
But
This needs to be at the front of the video. This is how I'm opening the video. This is the point at which you stop talking and move on to a different topic. When you sit in front of this man, and I heard that man also, the Black guy, under his breath mumble, and also the woman has a responsibility, the mother has a responsibility. You are not a leader. This is whataboutism again. Whataboutism, again, is the idea that instead of owning and conversing about that which is being brought up in a debate or conversation about what you have done, you decided instead of confronting what you've done, you will pivot and point to someone else's wrongdoing or someone else's responsibility to escape any kind of accountability around your action. This is degenerate in my mind. Under your breath, when you are talking about child support and the person you're speaking to says, well, if you father a child, you have a responsibility, you're going to mumble under your breath. And what about the woman? You're not a leader. You can't even take accountability for your responsibility. So since you asked, what about the woman? They're the custodial parent. You don't say, what about the woman in this context? Because they are taking care of the child. You being forced to pay is not even close in any way to the responsibility of the mother who has to take care of the child. Actually, wish the roles were reversed so you all could see what responsibility looks like. Didn't the CDC? This makes no sense to me. This actually makes no sense to me. And the fact that y'all are not embarrassed, sitting there crying about child support to someone who's like, well, you should take care of your responsibility, as you should. The fact that you don't understand how this looks and the substance of what y'all are saying, how idiotic it seems that y'all are up there whining about child support to a man who's literally saying, wait, just take care of your responsibility. I didn't know this was an issue. And y'all keep pressing it, but do not come up with any coherent reason as to why y'all don't want to pay child support. Like, no one has provided the answer. The answer is I can't afford it, which is wild. It's a wild statement. So because you can't afford it, you should have your children and someone else should take care of your children and you should not be held responsible for financially supporting your child. The bare minimum, by mind you, which is financially supporting your child. You shouldn't be held accountable for that. That don't make no sense. So anyway, let the conversation continues.
But before, because I know TJ ready to pass that baton because he got a whole different. But I just feel from the standpoint that I've watched it. I've watched my peers. I've watched people I don't know. I've seen people with money struggle with this. I've seen people without money struggle with this. So this is something I feel that is huge. And from the standpoint too, we're dying behind the stress behind how we're treated in the court system, not being able to see our kids, paying this money. We can't even take care of ourselves because we're shoveling out so much money to take care of the kids. Nobody's saying that we don't have a responsibility, but it's unfair and it's unjust, you know what I mean, that what the court system is doing on behalf of fathers. And, you know, at one point in time, I was like, man, this is a us thing. Until I was in Cobb County and I saw a white man get locked up like this.
You're giving so much money in child support that you can't take care of yourself. That don't make sense. Who should be taking care of these kids? Who should be the average child support payment? That's it on the screen. That's the average child support payment. You would think this is like thousands of dollars a month, by the way they're talking. No, it's not. It's hundreds of dollars. And when you go to the Black community, it's even less. What do you mean you can't afford it? And if you can't afford it, why are you having children? Why are you impregnating women if you can't take care of your children? Like, this does not make sense to me. And if you can't, who should? There is a child in need of support financially. And you are upset because you don't want to have to take care of your responsibility. I am glad we'll get to the moral versus legal later. I'm glad this is not just a moral obligation, but there is a legal requirement here because it feels like these people just want to abandon. Like, what do you mean you can't afford it? So it's an attack on masculinity. No, you can't pay. It is an attack on masculinity, i.e. the lack of ability to pay is the attack, not that you're required to pay it. Now there's going to be this man who comes in and talk about separation of power in the most rudimentary high school, not even high school, probably middle school approach to government that I've ever heard in my life. He thinks that the enforcement of child support payment is a violation of the separation of power. And like, even if this is true, the fact that there are exceptions in the separation of power is somehow lost on him. Like, this is not an absolute thing. But let's get into this. Oh my God. Let's get into this explanation by this man who apparently wrote a book about how he escaped paying child support. Like, why would you write a book to the world, announcing to the world that you escaped paying child support? There are children in need of this support. It's not, oh my God. I feel like these people think this is a punishment to the mother. Like, your child needs to be taken care of.
He paid child support, but he didn't give the attorney his due. So I'm gonna let you touch on it, but I know that was a real
let me
thing.
ask you guys this: what is your solution for that? Because you want to make sure that.
That's
all
his
right,
thing.
let's hear it.
Masculinity.
Good.
My name is Lionel T.J. Tillman. I am the author of How I Stopped Child Support Legally.
This man announced himself as the author of How I Stopped Child Support Payment. There is a book that this man wrote saying he has stopped child support payment. Did I read this book? I did not, but I should probably read this book. Drop a comment down below if y'all want to do a live stream where I review this book, where I go buy this book and we review it together, because girl, I can't. So let's hear the author of How I Stopped Child Support Payment tell us about policy. Again, this is the person running for president of the United States, and these men are just whining about child support. The reason I point this out is that this man is going to be the federal exec leader, right? Child support is a state-level problem. Child support, again, is a state-level problem. So them whining and crying to a man running for president of these United States about child support is wild. They're talking about separation of powers and they completely ignore federalism. Yeah, these men are whining and crying about separation of power, but they just completely ignore federalism and how the state and the federal government interact. But let's degenerate is as degenerate does. Let's hear it.
I represented myself in a 2-year hearing against child support and got my case dismissed for extrinsic fraud after 22 years. As Josh said, men are treated as third world citizens in the United States of America. America has a Title 4D crisis. Title 4D of the Social Security Act.
America has a Title 4D crisis. This is the enforcement policy around getting men to pay back the money that is a grant. But we'll get into his weird discussion. So men are treated as third world country citizens. I don't know what this man is talking. I don't know what this man is talking about, but I would love to interview him. Let's reach out to this man who wrote this book, because I would buy this book and I would love to interview him, and so he can school us on how child support system is a problem for men. Because girl,
is an enforcement to go after parents for money that was given out as a grant. Title 4A is a grant loan that's given to needy families. But yet we have an amendment in 1975, Title 4D, which goes after the fathers for non-custodial parents.
That is correct. That is correct. It does not go after the father. It goes after the non-custodial parent. The fact that you made synonymous father and non-custodial parent is wild to me. It's not wild, it's statistically true, but it highlights the problem. Y'all just want to just up and leave your responsibility. Yes, it should go after the non-custodial parent. And if you don't want it to go after you, then you would be the custodial parent, and then the mother would be the one it goes after to pay. Title 4D in terms of enforcement. But he doesn't know how to articulate this. What he's attempting to do is use administrative law and the process of delegation of power to say that this rule, this new law, is not constitutional. Not that he disagrees, even though he does, with what the law does, but the creation of the law in some way violates the separation of power in his mind. Let's hear him talk about this. That's the explanation. Because apparently, this man who never went to law school wrote a book about how he's smarter than literally everyone in law.
Finding him guilty in family court for abandonment. The issue is, we're still operating under the procedures from 1935 when Title 4A was implemented, when women couldn't work at that time. So when men went to war, yes, there are programs that are needed to assist a woman because she couldn't work in 1935. But they did this amendment in 1975, which is Title 4D of the Social Security Act, which enforces non-custodial parents to pay back a grant. What is a grant? A grant is a gift. A gift that's something there's no counterbalancing payment. Yet you have people being thrown in jail for a debt, which America, 28 USC 2007.
All right, let's stop there. A grant is not a gift. A gift is given without any real sense that you're going to do something in return. A grant, there's an expectation that you're going to do something in return. So no, sir, a grant is not a gift. That's the first thing. Now, this weird thing he does where he says he was fine with these laws and rules around child support and taking the man, the non-custodial parent, having to pay it back was fine when women couldn't work. All right, cool, that's cute. Now that women can work, should the woman be completely responsible financially for the child? Should the man have no response? Now that women can work, should the woman and the government take care of the child and the man not have a responsibility? Oh, because that don't make no sense to me. Your explanation for why you oppose it now is that women can work, where in the past women could not work. So men were the sole providers. And when men went to war, the government stepped in, and when men come back, the government get their money back. You are okay with that. Great, that's fine. Now, women can work. So when a man decides not to take care of his child and abandon his child, the woman can work and provide for said child. The government can help and step in. What responsibility does the man who impregnated this woman have to this woman and this child? Please let me know. Because if you were okay with it then because women couldn't work, now that women can work, does the man not have a responsibility anymore? Girl, please let me know. Please let me know. Because this is about custodial and non-custodial. So I don't know why it is a man's problem. If you are a custodial parent, then the government will go after the non-custodial. If men care so much about this, they could choose to be the custodial parent or stay in the children's life. Or, better yet, if they can't afford it, not have children. Do not impregnate. Girl, I am tried, not tired. You heard me right. I am tried. So let him continue. Let him cook, girl. Let him cook.
There is no debtor prison.
Right.
And then you have what Josh was saying with families. There's the Supreme Court case law. What is it? Well, every natural parent has a fundamental liberty interest in the care, custody, and management over their children. You talk about incentives. I heard you speak about due process. Due process is the backbone of of the United States Constitution. It's the backbone of our republic. What are you prepared to do? You said you pay child support. How?
I did.
You did pay child support. So
for many, many years.
So here's my question. You talked about executive orders, that we have 3 branches of government: executive, judicial, and legislative. The child support system somehow is operating in all 3 branches of government, which violates the separations of powers. This is a historic landmark case that took place in 2023. It's called SEC versus Cochran, which says that child support services violates the separation of powers. You just out of your mouth, you said, I can do executive orders, I can't touch judicial, I can't do these things. But how is child support able to operate under and violate the separation of powers? What are you prepared to do, being a person that paid child support at one point? What are you prepared to do to stop these people from thinking that they are above the law and violating the separations of powers? It's violating our Constitution.
Absolutely nothing. I wish I could take over RFK's body right now to just say, yeah, no, nothing. I'm not going to do anything, because this is the most rudimentary look at the separation of power. Easily, I'm going to put this, I'm going to put this up, this case law, United States versus Rock Royal Cooperative. It says, courts have approved the delegation of power where legislature has laid down a complete and definite declaration of policy and established objective standards or guidelines. This means that there are some powers within the legislative branch, for example, that you can delegate. The entire premise of administrative law is predicated on this reality. On this reality. This is how the government fundamentally runs. There is a separation of power. This separation is not absolute. It is so nuanced, and one of the most difficult classes in university, and if you go to law school, would be administrative law. Part of why it is deciding when a delegation of power is unconstitutional and when it's not. The idea that you are sitting up here thinking that you, someone who literally don't know anything about the law apparently, can use a separation of power as just a broad umbrella statement to explain why something is unconstitutional is wild to me. It is arrogant, wild, but ultimately extraordinarily reductive. That is so wild to me. That is absolutely wild to me. But let him cook. Let him cook.
Yeah, I mean, I paid child support because that's what I agreed to. I never litigated it, and I was never, but I have to, this is the first that I'm hearing about this issue. And what you're saying to me, some of it I don't understand because I don't understand how a federal law, child support is enforced by the states and family court. And I don't understand the relationship between the federal Social Security system, which was it Title IV?
Well, it's Title 4A is of the Social Security Act.
Yeah, so I'm interested to hear what you're saying.
All right. He's pointing out that, look, this is a state level issue, leave me out of it. But he's also pointing out, I pay child support and I am completely fine with paying child support. In fact, I voluntarily paid child support and I didn't even know this was an issue. Are you not embarrassed? Like, I would be very embarrassed. Anyway, because Killer Mike is about to come on, but let's have this man cook the burnt food.
It's something I never have considered, that this is a war on men. I always assumed that child support was something, an obligation that kind of everybody agreed you have to pay to take care of your child. But all I can do is say that, I want to listen to what you're saying and maybe start looking at it a different way.
Yeah, and that's the thing. So it's not the child support issue. Yes, every person has a moral obligation to support their offspring, but when you're not following your own procedures and you're taking men out of in order for a woman to receive these benefits, the father can't be in the home pursuant to Title 4A.
This, by the way, the father can't be in the home. This is not the man out of the home rule. It's not about the father. The man can get this money too. It's about custodial and non-custodial parent. The fact that he's framing this way is ridiculous. The fact that he's framing this way is ridiculous. And I don't know if he knows he's lying, but it's not the truth. And it's not accurate. Let's not use truth. Let's use accurate. It is wild to me that he just automatically assumes that the non-custodial parent is going to be the father. Wild in that it is expected based on the research, but it's also being accepted by these people who will literally tell you to your face that the CDC says that these men are the most involved fathers. Like, I'm not sure how you have these two things in reality, but let him eat this burned food because he finished cooking. The food was burned. He finished it. Now let him eat.
So the problem is they're acting above the law. They're violating the separations of powers. And it is unlawful. It violates the Constitution.
If you were living in the home, you would be presumably paying for everything that's going on in the home, your share, right?
Right.
So I hate this so much. Someone is like, keep repeating, it's violating the separation of power. It's violating the separation of power. If you do this to me, I'm going to stop you and have you explain how. And you need to explain to me not just how, but after you figure out what the separation of power means, figure out also what the exceptions are, right? Because there are several limitations to the separation of power. Again, the entirety of the administrative rule and law area is predicated on allowing the executive branch, for example, to have some legislative power. They won't say it as directly as I'm saying it now, administrative law. I don't know what this man is talking about. I do not know what this man is sitting up here talking about. Anyway, let him cook. We almost get Mike. Killer Mike is about to come on. The 3-time Grammy winner. I don't know how many Grammy he has, but he won a bunch of Grammys the other day. So he's about to come on and tell us why we need to incentivize fathers to be in their children's life financially. That you need an incentive as a father to be in your child's life is just diabolical. I feel like diabolical is the word of the day. And you gotta shut up. Ain't nobody got time for this.
Everything that's going on in the home, your share, right?
Right. So when you say you have an obligation, but there's...
So the obligation only arises when you leave the home, right?
No.
Yeah, no, the obligation for child support applies when you are no longer supporting your child and the mother or father, the custodial parent, has to go to get legal help in order to enforce your payment to your child. What do you mean? If you're married in a relationship and you're at home, you don't need to go into the child support discussion. I am so annoyed by these people.
The obligation is from when the child is born. So there's Supreme Court case law that says yes, every natural person has an obligation to support their offspring, but when that...
They need to move that up from when a child is born to conception. when the child is conceived. Because these people ran around supporting and celebrating Roe v. Wade being overturned. And I'm concerned that they don't understand what this would mean. And there are some states looking into how early they can put fathers, in this case, on child support. And these people are mad. Like, I'm confused what you thought. Anyway, let's continue. Let's continue.
But when that obligation is reduced to a money judgment, therefore a debt, at that point, people are now being incarcerated for child support when it is actually unlawful pursuant to the United States Constitution. And we talk about due process. Due process is the backbone of our United States Constitution. Yet people are still being incarcerated.
They're being incarcerated for violating an order or something like that, not for the child. Let's hurry up. Let's hurry this up.
They're incarcerated for contempt of court. Is that?
But they're
Is that why they're
right? So
Yeah,
in
'cause
contempt of court
that's a loophole. And the courts, of course,
to use, yes.
What are you saying?
Fellow child support payer would like to interject.
Yeah.
All right, so now we're going to have Killer Mike jump in because he's like fellow child supporter. I don't know what he's doing. He jumps up because he has a plan that will save the black community. And by black community, I mean black men, because he's not about to sit here and talk about black women and the child. He is just here to explain how bad child support and forcing men to pay child support is on the men.
Listen, I wasn't gonna jump on camera, but y'all done said some interesting shit.
Let's go, brother.
Really quickly, because what you asked for was a solution. It's something that I have been thinking about. I'm just jumping. This is not an official endorsement, although I do like a lot of what's been said here, so I'm gonna stay out the way. But
Let me say, before we get into the Killer Mike section, I do not dislike Killer Mike. I follow some of his work and talks, and I do think he has a care for improving the black community. I do also know that leans very specifically to black men. And this comes out very obviously here. So my review currently is not going to be about how I feel about him personally. There's a part of me, even though I detest the reality of my hotepishness when I was in uni, I am okay with the fact that it's a glimmer of hope somewhere in the back of my soul that I could be that hotep person again, but it's probably not going to happen anytime soon. So I don't dislike Killer Mike. I don't know enough about him to dislike him. From what I've heard him say, he does speak in black liberation language. So I'm never against this fully, ever really. But what I'm realizing, a lot of the liberation language is about black manhood and not about black community. It's just men. But here we go. This is an example.
just a matter of child support to help you better understand. Child support in the case of what you're saying is usually you were married to your children's mother.
Yeah.
Virtually. Well, most 70% of black children are born out of wedlock. So child support is against you day one when you're a black man, more likely, because more likely you're not married. Now.
Okay, then get married. I don't actually think marriage solves the problem, right, of children needing help. Just getting married without economics to back that up doesn't actually help in my mind. But if that's the problem, get married. Don't have children before you're married. Saying over 70% of black kids are born out of wedlock, therefore we need to give these men resources or whatever. Like, sure. But the first issue is impregnating women and women getting pregnant without the resources. I would assume that's where we start, but absolutely not. That is not where he starts. So let him cook.
And this same thing I tell my daughter's boyfriends, don't get her pregnant. If she has a big, huge family that's going to take care of this baby, you're going to piss her off and she's going to go file for benefits. Or she's going to need them in the case her mother needed them when she was a kid. Me and her mother were together. We were not married. But her mother signed up.
You actually have this conversation with your daughter's boyfriend?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. I tell them, I say, no, she, understand now, she is from a great family. Now, I know this is not the case for every girl, but she's from a big, huge family, lots of aunts. She's going to be okay, but you're going to piss her off. You're going to leave her for another girl. You guys are going to fall out of love. She's going to play a lot of Chris Brown records, and she's going to say, fuck it, I'm going. But I say that because.
So you thought that it was okay to talk to your child's boyfriend to tell him not to impregnate her, not because they're not ready, but because if he does that, she might come after him and will come after him for child support. So it seems like you are more in tune with the boyfriend of your daughter than with your daughter. This is wow, that you have more allegiance to the random man that your daughter is dating than to your daughter. Like, how is this a thing when RFK says, hey, did you really have this conversation with your daughter's boyfriend? He is saying, this sounds really weird. This is a weird conversation to have. Did you actually do that? You saying yes, I don't think you quite understand, Killer Mike, what that just meant. And in everyone's mind, how weird that is. But let him cook.
I say that because me and her mother were together from day one. Her mother did not work. I did work. Her mother, I put through school. I did not put myself through school. I did everything I could to make sure that in case I died, this woman would be okay with my children. She signed up for TANF, welfare, that type of stuff, which helps. It helps to bridge, especially when you're a young family. We know our welfare system has been constructed in a way that excludes men. It gave women an incentive not to have men in it.
Right.
It actually says, we'll come through your house and we'll search your house, and if
Look for
your children
shoes,
in there.
yeah.
So you're kind of set up from day one.
Hold on, you didn't know they looked under your bed and checked?
Yeah.
No, that's not true. Men can now file for welfare. Most of the welfare can go to men. So this idea that, and he's now talking about the man out of the home rule, a 4-year at most rule in a couple of states in the 1960s, and these men still whine and cry about this reality, which it was a sad reality, except if they cared that much, they would have fought it at the Supreme Court. Like a black woman went to the Supreme Court, got it overturned, and now men can be in the home. I am so annoyed by this reality that these men literally don't do any kind of research and work around the fact that they too can benefit. Now, Killer Mike said he sent this ex-girlfriend to school and he took care of them, yet she was able to file for TANF, or get TANF and welfare generally. Don't sound like you were able to take care of them well. I mean, obviously now he's rich, I think, I don't know. But if your girlfriend at the time that you were sending through school and taking care of everything is filing for welfare and getting welfare, qualifying for welfare, don't sound like you. All right, girl.
Ask somebody who worked for HUD. That's why Ben Carson shouldn't have been running HUD. God bless him. I wanted to work on my brain, but not control my house. So back to child support. I think the solution is this, and I'm out your way. 2 years. Young woman gets pregnant as a teenager. Young man and woman get pregnant. This is the 2-year plan. First 2 years are debt-free. You don't have to pay the government anything back. So she doesn't get to drag him into court and the court doesn't say, you owe us money for investing in your child through food programs, through early Head Start programs. Because in those 2 years, the boy has the option, or not even the option, he has the demand of the co-man to then go to a trade school. You have to go to a trade school, which incentivizes the United States to do it because we need more tradespeople. We don't have enough carpenters, we don't have enough electricians, we don't have enough people building roads. In my community, the girls are going to college and graduating. They have no men to marry because the boys are not going to college in the same way. My teachers were married to a tradesman. My teacher, who we call doctor, her husband owned a locksmith company. Her husband was a carpenter, was a mechanic. So they had a good life. Their kids went to school right the same schools we went to. I think that the incentive to solving the child support problem and a part of solving our infrastructure problem is to incentivize young boys who have gotten a girl pregnant. You must now go through 2 years of trade school.
Well, wait a minute. So, okay.
You want to incentivize young men to go to trade school. Okay, that's fine. I'm for this. What if they don't want to go? What if they fail? Should the government just take 2 years and for 2 years pay for this child and debt-free? What happens, again, if the boy doesn't go to trade school or fails? What if the boy doesn't want to go to trade school and is actually really smart and want to be a lawyer? Separately, when you say the women in the black community are going to school and going to college and graduating, but they don't have any man up there with them who is marriage material because the boys aren't as successful, why can't they just do that? Why can't men go to school and be better? Boys and girls are being raised in the same neighborhood. Women are faced with sexism. Black women are faced with sexism and racism. Yet in this patriarchy, they still can elevate. And you're saying the boys aren't doing it. Not that they can't, just make them do it. And I know it's not as simple because of structural issues. But if women can do it, so can men. Most of the educational system was designed around the ability that women wouldn't be able to succeed and men were. And so now that women are able to go there and succeed, there's this dusty narrative now that women are more able to learn and blah, blah, blah. Even if that were true, I don't think the bar for education is so high that an average man of average intelligence can't go to school and learn. So like, this is weird. It's not an excuse that boys develop slower than girls. It's also not an excuse because you don't develop that slow that you can't go to uni and learn and graduate. Like, weird. You can at least graduate with a C.
I like what
Let
you
me
said.
give you the rest of the answer first.
Okay, go ahead.
After that boy graduates, you get a further incentive if you and the girl marry. If you and the girl marry, we'll give you these incentives: zero finance home loans, something out of HUD besides an apartment with a leaky faucet.
So these men just want people to take care of them. These men just want the government to take care of them. These are not incentives. Just give me money, take care of my child, send me to school. When I come out, if I marry, you give me more money and opportunities. Okay, I'm fine with this, by the way. This could be a conversation on the reparation. Now, I'm not telling people how to do reparation because in my mind, reparation should be hard cash. Ain't nobody got time for you to do systems and blah, blah, blah. Give these people money. And Jamaicans can go to the UK and get money. But if this was happening, this conversation was happening in the context of reparation, it would make sense for you to be demanding to be taken care of. Happening outside of reparation is wild. This conversation happening outside of reparation and the government redressing past harm is wild to me. And maybe I should think of it as the government redressing past harm for discrimination, because what we do know is this, the civil rights and all of the affirmative action cases up until today all result in colorblindness to race, colorblind approach to race. So if you think there's going to be a government program that specifically outlines for Black men to get this kind of treatment, i.e. when they impregnate a woman. Does this apply when they impregnate white women too? I don't know. But when they impregnate a woman, that the government will take care of it for 2 years, they will go to trade school, they'll come back and there'll be further incentives from the government to give them access to further resources such as a home if they get married. If you think that is going to fly in the face of the Equal Protection Clause, I think you have another thing coming. And not because I disagree with that there should be carve-out for Black people. I think there should because of the historical wrong and redressing that. But the Supreme Court is very much not about that life. The Supreme Court is very much not about that life, as we've seen with the school admissions. Let's see what happens.
And rats and roaches in it, but incentivize marriage, which then strengthens our community, the Black community, and strengthens the greater community, because now you have more American marriages, you have people with stronger financial stability, and you have tradespeople married to women of education, and you begin to recreate communities like what Auburn Avenue was, what Edgewood was.
You have tradespeople, trade men, marrying women with education. Why can't we get education too? Like, it feels like very doom and gloom, like we don't have any option. Men have to be tradesmen because we can't use our intellectual prowess. It's like, why? I am not saying uni is not that difficult. It is difficult, but I know that an average intelligent man, Black man, can go to university and do well enough to graduate and get a job and move up the socioeconomic ladder. Like, I don't like this idea that the only option for Black men is that they go into trade school. This is wild to me. And he doesn't say only, but he speaks so generally when it comes to Black men. It's like wild. And also, he keeps talking about Black boys and young men or whatever. These are not teens that are getting pregnant and whatever. These are grown people. So, like, even if we accept Killer Mike's plan, it only applies, as he articulates it, to young people in high school. So, like, girl, what are we doing? It don't make no sense.
I believe you could do this from the executive order because the money that funnels down from the feds through the states to help mothers, then it can be attached. Well, we're not only helping mothers, we're helping fathers too. If a boy gets a woman pregnant, not only does she receive TANF, I see your face, right? Good idea. If a woman receives TANF, she receives this, the boy now has a must. You're federally required now to go to trade school.
You say they're federally required to go to trade school. What happens if they say no? Because you seem to say they're required without a penalty. Without the penalty, the requirement is literally useless. Also, when you say the money coming down, welfare can now, in your plan, help the father, it does help the father. If you want to be the custodial parent, it would help. I don't like this.
And in those 2 years, what you put out on the other side is a person who's trained, a person who has an incentive to marry, and a person who becomes a taxpayer and not just a taker. But I think that's the answer, sir. And I'll get out y'all's way.
All right, I got some questions for you, though.
For me? Okay, yes, sir.
So
You gonna keep me on that camera time?
you just, because, I'd love to hear a solution that I really believe in, but
Yeah.
I'm having trouble getting my mind around this. So how do you compel somebody to go to school?
You just make it a requirement the same way you compel them on probation.
How do you compel someone to go to school? This is a great question. How do you compel someone to go to school without any consequence at the back end if they decide not to go? That is the full question. But let's hear Killer Mike's response to this very, very important question. If you're saying that the government is going to require the man to go to trade school, how do you compel them to do it? Here, let's hear it, Killer Mike.
How do you compel me to go to a drug course when I'm probation? I don't want to go to jail.
You can do that, right?
Yeah, I don't want to go. I'm serving 5 years federal time. I know the drug course gives me 18 months off. I'm not a junkie, but I'm going to go act like one because you're going to let me out at 18 months earlier.
Yeah.
I'm a boy. I know where the child support shit is.
So what
at.
happens if you say I'm not going to school or you flunk out?
Then you know what? You're not going to flunk out of trade school because we're going to put our arms around you and people like Georgia Youth Bill and...
What happens if they flunk out of school? They're not going to flunk out because we're going to put our hands around them. Kawhi, what happens if they flunk out of trade school? They're not going to because we're going to have our hands around them. Okay, that's cute. We're in a hypothetical world. What if they do? Take the hypo, they do. What should we do in the case that they definitely flunk out? They won't. That is not a response. That is not a response. This is not a fully thought out idea. You can't say we're going to make them demand, command, request, force them to do it without any consequence if they decide not to. Girl, in Jamaica, just logy. The man just logy, son. The man just logy.
Well, you're a drug addict. You just don't show up for trade school. And you flunk out.
Yeah.
Oh, then what happens?
Well, I don't think most young boys are going to flunk out of trade school.
No, but what happens to the ones that do?
The ones that do, I think, are a smaller margin, and the fate has already shown what'll happen. You'll limit them.
What is the sanction?
This is what happens. Okay. What happens is they take your driver's license, which takes your ability to drive a box truck, so you can't work for Amazon. What happens is they take your ability to get a passport. So even if you learn something like welding, underwater welding, you can't work offshore because you can't go out the country. What happens is for the rest of your life, you damn near have felon status because you are owed debt that's compounding. So the opposite of that is go to school for 2 years, learn how to cut hair, learn how to lay a floor.
He's telling now what happens currently. We don't care. We're asking you, Killer Mike. We the people want to know. What should happen if we're saying you are required to go to trade school? What happens if they do not? Because that requirement has to come with consequences attached to it, or else it's not a requirement, it's just a suggestion. We are suggesting you go to trade school, and if you don't go, then nothing. How can you require something without any consequence if they don't? I literally can't. Let's hear him finish up.
Learn how to lay some wire, and you don't have that. Our boys, it's not that they don't want to go to school. We used to have trade schools in high school when your uncle was president. It's not that our kids are...
I know.
Yeah, it's not that our kids want to be chubby. Your Lord knows I eat a lot, but I still got to get up and move my body in the morning. We took physical fitness out of school. Yeah. We took, even in matters of guns, my mother took marksmanship in school. She learned how to shoot a bow and arrow. So there's so much that we've taken out of school that we're robbing our kids anyway. But again, I really believe what fixed the child support and welfare, and by proxy Angela's abortion issue, what fixes that is stop focusing on just the half that gets pregnant, because 2 people get pregnant.
That's right.
The woman gets pregnant and the man gets pregnant because financially, if he does not hold up this financial responsibility, the courts will call him to task.
2 people get pregnant. The woman and the man get pregnant. The man have financial pregnancy. It must be nice to equate your quote-unquote financial pregnancy to a woman carrying a child for 9 months. You must think that's equivalent, girl. Your financial. The $200, the less than $500 a month, the $50 a month for some people, that is getting paid a month is financial pregnancy. In the way that you carry the child. Girl, y'all play. Not only do you carry the child, you also have to take care of the child because you're the custodial parent. But they think this financial pregnancy, girl. They call it financial pregnancy. Let Killer Mike eat.
I'm saying instead of using the money to use the courts to call these young men to task, let's get these young men. You're 16, you got a girl pregnant. All right, it used to be the girl would have to drop out of school, go have the baby, come back. All right, young man, we're going to pull you out of school. You now have to go to alternative school. this alternative school. Now you go to the Booker T. Washington Alternative School. At the Booker T. Washington Alternative School, you will do reading, writing, and arithmetic, but you have to pick a trade or elective that you can master in 2 years. And when you graduate, we're graduating a worker that can then go work on many of the things that our government needs from an infrastructure standpoint. He can support his child, whether through child support, or we could further incentivize through merit, saying if these 2 young kids marry now, we will pay for her 2 years of associate's degrees, and we will give this family subsidies, much like a farm, for the next 2 years until they stay.
And then how is the child taken care of during the 2 years that the...
We still give them the welfare. All of the federal and state funding and county municipalities, she still gets that funding. Right now, that funding counts against the boy, though.
It does.
It counts against him because the court is in car and the court calls and it's saying, you owe us this money. I didn't have 60 grand when the court told me I owed 60 grand. So I had to go figure out getting 60 grand.
Are you talking hypothetically, or did that actually happen to you?
Yeah, I've paid over $500,000 in child support.
But because you can't adjudicate procreation. That's the problem.
So, in their world, the man's responsibility is financial. So the woman gets to sit there and take care of the child, and the man goes to school, and the government pays for it. Period. So, in his world, if you're a man and you don't know what to do with your life, get a woman pregnant, the government will pay for it and require you to go to trade school. Then after trade school, the government will give you a job. And after you get this job, if you marry them, then you'll get access to homes, and you get to live out your life if you didn't have an option. Again, I don't see a problem with this in the discussion of reparation, but this feels like the conversation is about the government paying for the lives of men. Who gonna pay for this trade school? Does the government pay for this trade school? And if the government doesn't pay for this trade school, what happens if the man doesn't have the money to go to trade school? Like, I'm confused. Let Killer Mike finish it up, and then we get to the foolishness in the end. Because at least Killer Mike had a resolution, a terrible resolution, a useless resolution. Killer Mike is telling y'all that they need incentives in order to take care of their children. This is wild to me, but this is what Killer Mike is saying. And I can appreciate a solution. A bad solution it is, but a solution nonetheless. So I can appreciate a solution. So let's continue, Killer Mike. I was going to just call him Killer, but no, Mike.
Hold on, because them big words, before we get to the T.I. word. Before we get to the T, just let me finish this part, because he's a lawyer, he understands. What I'm saying is, I gave a mother of my children $1,000 for a birthday party. The birthday party fell through, I gave her another $1,000 the following week. And the following week, she went to court and said he hasn't given me anything in years, and that was not true. What she was a desperate woman, and she needed more money. And instead of sitting down with us and us having
you gave her $1,000 cash?
I gave her $1,000 cash. I had just had a, because we had a trust relationship. We made love. We made a child. So I wasn't handling it. I wasn't handling it as though it was business, but it's business. And young men don't understand that. So what I'm saying is to get that part of the business that was have a woman so desperate, she says, well, I gotta go lie.
This idea that he's positing might have been true for him. But if men don't understand it, and men are giving money to women, and then women are turning their backs against these men and going to child support court, even though these men are giving them money, then teach these men to go through the court and record the money they're giving these women, not destroy the system. Like, that is wild. So, like, I give money, and she still wanted more money, and that's why she took me, and I gave her more. I was like, okay, then record the money you're giving. But that's not what. You just don't want to be legally required, and that's the annoying part, that they're not owning the fact that they literally do not want to be legally required to give the money to the child. They don't mind the moral obligation and failing their moral obligation. They don't want legal enforcement. That's the problem.
To a court. And to have a young man say, well, I got to do anything I can do to pay it. The government has an incentive at this time. Our government says we need infrastructure workers. Our government says we need more kids going to trade school. What better experiment or way to prove that that system works than taking child support where 70% of kids are born out of wedlock, taking child support where most of our young men are not going to college at the level they did, and say, well, trade school is an answer not only for this young man and his financial situation and this young woman, but also what our government is going to need in terms of hiring people. I think that the ultimate answer is in bringing trades back in high school, better sex education with young men. I think there could be a federal program that comes into barbershops, that goes into schools as young as, I would say, middle school, and starts to teach boys about their sexual funding. I think condoms should be free. I think that boys should be taught how to use condoms. I think that there are lots of things that we can do.
I don't think condoms should be free. I mean, I'm kidding. I'm okay with condoms being free. The issue, though, is if you can't afford a condom, you probably shouldn't be having... I'm going to leave that alone. Because at the 1 hour, it was 1 hour, 2 minutes and 30 seconds in. So 1 hour, 2 minutes and 30 seconds in, he said, if a boy gets a woman pregnant, this is a wild statement because boys aren't getting women pregnant by and large. And the reality is the opposite, right? And so like this infantilization of boys, of men, and this adultification of women is ridiculous to me, of females and males. So it tends to happen in this way where the men speaking, the people who engage in Black liberation, tends to, for the female, I'm using the scientific phrase here, adultify females, and then for male, they infantilize them, regardless of the age. This is a problem. And I don't know that this is a conscious thing being done or if it's just a natural way of speaking so that you get to coddle the man and then disregard the women. That is ridiculous to me. Anywho, let's continue. I don't really care anything more about what Killer Mike is saying. Let's get into some foolishness. I want to go to the part where they're talking about men give life and women give birth. Because this is so dusty. This is such a dusty statement, and I'm going to explain why.
RFK, please explain what adjudicate procreation means, or adjudicate means. Why Mike leaves. Because he's the one who said he doesn't know what that means. Because you can't adjudicate procreation.
Of course not.
You know, and that's what's happening, right? With all these policies, all these terms, all these laws, all this legislation, right? And so if you can't adjudicate procreation, a man gives life, a woman gives birth. So if we're let's stop with the democracy.
But okay, I mean, just going back.
I don't care what his response to this. He said, men give life and women give birth. Abortion would have happened if men give life. Abortion should happen when a man. Let me leave that alone. I don't want to get into a disgusting conversation. But it feels like the man should be in prison for abortion. If men give life. What do you mean men give life and women give birth? By the way, by saying this is an attempt, maybe not consciously, to reduce the woman's role by saying the woman is just a vessel for carrying the life, but the life is given by the man. Girl, if so, then have the life without the woman. Let's see. Talking about give birth. Have the life without giving birth, then, girl. Do it. That don't make no sense. If anyone is giving life, it's going to be the woman who carries the child and let the child live and be a parasite on her body. Like when you mean men give life and women give birth, how are you going to sit there and try to diminish the woman's role in creating a new person? You're toxic! Yeah, you can't tell me these men ain't toxic. These men have got to be, these men have to be toxic. For you to even fix your face to sit up there talking about men give life and women give birth is wild. What life you give, girl? You think I can't explain any of this.
Are you arguing that a man, if he gets a woman pregnant, should have no obligation to that child?
Absolutely not.
All right. So
no, absolutely not.
So it's just the amount of obligation, the term of that
Well, it's hard coming from me being a person of covenant instead of contract. When you lay down with a woman.
RFK says, are you saying you should have no obligation, limited obligation? They can't even answer that question. Should there be an obligation? That's the question. Answer that. For me, I believe in covenant and not. We don't care what you believe in, girl. The question is, should there be an obligation and what should the obligation be financially for the man? Should there be a financial obligation? Okay, there should be. Because you're not going to sit up there, as dusty as you are, I know you're not going to sit up there and say there shouldn't be a financial obligation for the man. What you're going to try to say is that the government shouldn't enforce it through the whatever system. Okay, how do we enforce men taking on their financial responsibility? If you believe there should be a financial responsibility, not just a responsibility, because these people don't care about responsibility generally, they're talking about financial responsibility. If there is a financial responsibility in your mind for a father to their child, what is that financial responsibility and how should it be enforced? Should we just say, oh, there exists a moral obligation to pay for your child. However, if you don't pay for your child, we will just excuse it. We will ignore it. We won't do anything about it. Is that what you want? Because that don't make no sense. There's a legal obligation coming in, people are still not paying it. You think people are more inclined to pay it when there's not a legal obligation and just a moral one? Because morality has stopped us from doing things that we shouldn't do before.
Yeah, that's a covenant. But when you go get a marriage certificate, now that's a contract. And so anytime you're working in contracts, then it's going to be about money. And so if you break up with her and now she's vindictive, or if the man's vindictive, now the child suffers because I'm going to make this man pay for leaving me, or I'm not going to be seeing this child because you left me, and so I'm not going to do anything for the child. So it goes both ways, right? Yeah. Well, men and women do that. Mm-hmm. But most of the time you see men getting taken advantage of in the court system because they've adjudicated procreation. And so at the end of the day, if I give life and she gives birth, there has to be some accountability to the system to say, well, let's go have some ease on the person that gave the life.
No one's going easy on the person who gives life. The woman who gives life has to take care of the child because you have left the child, and your only responsibility seems to be financial, and you don't even want to do that. What do you mean the system should go easy on the person who gives life? Who gives life? Isn't the woman the one who gave life? You talk, well, men give life and women give birth. No, if you're doing that, then it looks like y'all come together to help create the environment for life, and she has to carry it and then give birth. It's not men give no life and women give no birth. Try to give the life by yourself then. If you give life by yourself. That don't make no sense. It sounds good when you say to people who are insignificant and want to diminish women's role in giving life to a person, creating another person, but it absolutely makes no sense talking about where you give life. You don't give no life. There ain't no life. Men give life. You should take it easy on the people who give life. The man's question, because he's not about to repeat it out of respect for y'all, I don't know why he is not more forceful with his questioning. What should the responsibility be of the man financially? Should there be a financial responsibility for men who father children? Okay, there should be. Got it. How do we enforce that? Talking about take it easy.
Because you can have a bunch of soil, but if there's no seeds, we have no children.
The thing is,
does that make sense, though?
Yeah, you can have a bunch of seed in your mind and there will be no children still. So you don't give no life. Yeah, you can have a bunch of soil without seed. There is nothing there. Okay, have a bunch of seed without the woman and the woman's egg and see what happens. I just feel like these people are like actually dumb. How are you going to sit there and attempt to diminish the role of the women in bringing forth life? Oh, they can't have a child without my what? You can't have a child without them either. Like, what do you mean? And if the Bible is to be believed, let me stop.
Child support. So therefore, that child support system is working exactly the way it was designed.
But it goes, but the child support, the abortion, and all those things are all collective things in my summation to stop procreation anyways for melanated people in America. If we go back to having indigenous ways and live under theocracy instead of just a democracy, theocracy was saying, let's obey the laws of the Most High. Let's obey the laws of the land for real. Not the laws of man. The laws of the land say if it's cold, you get a jacket. If it's hot, you get some shade. If you plant a seed, it creates a harvest and you can have fruit or vegetation. But we're obeying the laws of man. And so when we start obeying the laws of man, now we get out of theocracy and we go to democracy. And the prefix to democracy is demon. And that's why the system is demonic.
He said we should go to a theocracy. This man is advocating for the U.S. government to be a theocracy. They were just arguing, by the way, about separation of powers. These people, they ignore federalism, right? Because they're telling the federal government to dictate what the state do, and they can do that through funding, so fine. But they're arguing about separation of powers, right? And then in the same conversation, they're telling the U.S. government that has a separation of state, church and state. Now, this is not as clear-cut either. It's not that absolute either. They're telling them that we should turn the democracy into a theocracy in the same dusty conversation. Y'all see how none of this makes sense? The man is running for president of the United States, and one of the fundamental principles that everyone is advocating is that there should be a separation of church and state. We all kind of agree to that, even though we don't follow through with it as strictly as one would think. But neither here nor there. These men are arguing that the problem with America and the black community is that we need to transform the entire government system to a theocracy so it can benefit black men and the black community. You think a theocracy is what we need. All right, girl, I'm just going to jump to the conclusion. I do actually have some more things, but I'm going to just jump to the conclusion. And I'm going to say this. I'm ignoring Angela Stanton, who comes on and talks about abortion. It's fine. This is a conversation in Georgia, and there was no mention of legitimation at all. That took place, conversation around children's child support, marriage, and whatever, and there was no mention of legitimation. These people aren't serious. They're just there to hear themselves talk, and I'm not about to hear any of this. I will also conclude by saying, maybe Monique was right. Drop them kids off 2024. Let these men become the custodial parent, and let's see if they think the same thing about child support being an attack on men. Because that is wild to me. The system created by men around child support is working in the best interest of men who want to be non-custodial parent and don't have to engage in the upbringing of their children. They just pay the mother to take care of the child and pay for the child's food and clothing or whatever, right? But not even that. Child support is so low for certain people. There are people who are paying $50. This man said he wrote a book about how he does not pay child support. So the idea that you need to completely change the system because it's an attack on man is wow to me. While there is a man on the panel talking about how he got out of paying child support legally. Therefore, how is this an attack on men? Y'all play too much. The problem with Monique Drop Them Kids Off 2024 is that when you do it, you can't be like Monique and then come and talk about your child publicly, because then that gives them the right to point out how you abandoned them. So, like, if you're going to drop them kids off also mentally, forget about it. Because apparently that's what they're doing. I'm kidding. I am not advocating for that. That was a joke. I am joking. Monique, the comedian, went on stage talking about F them kids and cursing out his son. And I was like, oh my God, this is toxic. So I will forever remind you of what Monique did. And it is what it is. This conversation was absolutely disgusting. There was no real policy advocacy at all. These men just wanted to sit around and whine and cry about child support to a man who literally was part of the families involved in creating the system, maintaining the system, and who understands how the system benefit men. Because you as a man, one of those men in that room, don't understand how only paying for your child benefits you and frees you up to go live your life, while it essentially subjugates the woman. Why you don't understand that and how to live and benefit from the patriarchy that does benefit you is wild to me. In any case, have a wonderful, wonderful time. Again, remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you again later.